Hey everyone, I'm Jack.
And I'm Alex.
And welcome back to our mini-series covering Doom: The Dark Ages. Today we'll be going over the game's bosses, of which left a surprising impression despite their general lack of quantity. Though not exactly boss-centric, The Dark Ages houses some great fights that turned out well, both in story importance and gameplay innovation. With id Software's gradual rise in boss development from 2016 to Eternal to the Ancient Gods to now, I'd argue these fights are unquestionably the most polished in the Doom series. Before we begin, we'd like to give a moment to thank Bethesda Softworks and id Software for a review copy. As fans of Doom, we are just in shock and appreciative at the opportunity. As well, we'd like to give thanks to our wonderful patrons as always, and if you're interested in joining, be sure to check it out, linked in the description below. So, how do we feel the fights stack up? Let's get into the video.
Number 8, Vagary Champion. Here we have a retro callback to Doom 3, which I played for like an hour and really didn't like and uninstalled. I don't think I ever made it to the boss fight against the Vagary, but I googled a picture of him and he seems to have opted for total baldness over the brutal Norwood 5 of the Dark Ages Vagary. For that matter, even the imps in this game are all balding for some reason. Must be something in the air back in the Dark Ages. Anyways, this fight is fine for the most part, but ends up in last place primarily for the annoyingness of his slowdown poison gunk. It's mainly an issue because he's armored, which incentivizes the use of melee weapons or closer range guns like the shotgun. This is all well and good until he drops a vomit orb right in front of him, and now any use of melee or shield charging will entrap you in a health obliterating mire of muck. It doesn't help that it's a bit hard to notice in the heat of battle, so I'm seldom aware of said muck until I'm already knee deep in this stuff. This complaint is going to be old hat to id Software, since they already know how much people hate shit that slows you down, from the reception to Eternal's purple goo. Everything else about the Vagary Champion is solid though. He's very satisfying to parry, and there are few enemies more gratifying to light into than these scuttling puke meisters. I just wish their area denial tactics were less aggressively irritating and didn't stay in place for 10 million eons before fading out. Overall though, I liked that id pivoted back towards a more 2016 style boss philosophy of just shooting motherfuckers until they die without including a mandatory gimmick.
Number 7, Armored Titan. This is definitely the most contentious boss due to it being so short, like 15 to 20 seconds. I tried punching the Titan for a bit to see what would happen, but you can only beat it with finishers, I think. Maybe you can fist it to death, but it would take a while. Sometimes finishing quick is optimal. There's really not much to this. Avoid hitting the shield, and otherwise it's no different from the average D-Robe Titan. It even becomes a regular enemy in the later Atlan segments. It does end on a high note, with the Titan getting BDSM'd with a nuke, but despite the badassery of that, the Armored Titan is just not a boss enough to beat out any of the other fights besides the Vagary Champion. I'd say it should feel lucky just to be considered.
Number 6, Agadon Champion. That's Agaddon, unlike what some of the typo-plagued promotional material will tell you. Here we get to take a look at what the Doom Hunters looked like before they got turned into flying tank monsters. Much like their future counterparts, they love shielding and hate catching the Doom Slayer in their line of sight. They're probably the closest thing this game has to the Marauders from Eternal, since they spend a lot of time being totally invincible. This of course opens up complaints from the red light green light crowd who made such a fuss over how it impacts the combat rhythm by taking agency out of your hands. I can see how it would bug people honestly, and it definitely makes them less intimidating with how passive their AI is. You can practically ignore them in group fights as long as you remember to dodge the occasional shield skull projectile. I still like the Agadon Champion, but in a one-on-one fight like this introductory boss encounter, you really do feel the waiting game side of things, and I was just shooting grenades at his shield for kicks because I had nothing better to do. With the Marauders, you could at least run backwards and keep them at mid-range to bait the green flashes, but here you don't have a very obvious way of making them open up faster, and their attacks are super easy to avoid, so the pressure that made the Marauders so engaging is pretty much gone. I suppose it sounds like I'm shitting on this guy even more than the Vagary, but I do like this fight, really, honest. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like I probably do prefer the Komodo Champion, even though the intro text for this segment says otherwise. It is possible that players will discover ways to more efficiently draw the Agadon Champion out of his shell though, which would make him a far more engaging foe and probably worthy of a higher spot on the list.
Number 5, Komodo Champion. This is our choice for the best of the 3 super heavy champions, which collectively were a cool mini-boss subcategory. The Komodo champion is exceptionally quick, second in speed only to the Cosmic Baron, and makes use of its entire 4-legged body. I really like the use of its tail and combos, and I also think the range of the spear makes it stand out among other super heavies. Though the champions are, again, just slightly more difficult to stagger variants of their regular selves, the Komodo champion feels like a genuine boss fight, with different strategies impacting experience. I'm personally a huge fan of the Ravager and Chain Shot here. Its time between swings is so long you can get away with either. The Komodo champion is mechanically sound and looks great, but definitely the least demonic of the game's enemies in my opinion. It reminds me of Boga from Revenge of the Sith if it was poorly trained.
Number 4, Creed Maker. One of the driving inspirations behind Dark Ages combat design was returning to the projectile dodging combat that was so prevalent in the classic titles. Nowhere is that more apparent than the fight with the treacherous Creed Maker, who pretty much forces you to play Toho. It's in some ways trickier than any other bullet hell segment I can recall in the game, because all the while he's peppering you with very well-aimed explosives and regular bolts of green death. Those Maker grenades pretty much exist to prevent you from holding the stick in any one direction, and forces you to consciously dodge all of them in a way that is more engaging than simple strafing. While harder, it in turn feels a lot better to evade and makes the fight a lot more tricky in a good way. The motivation behind Creed's treachery is implied to be following the will of the Con Maker, but that's something you really have to be paying attention to latch onto, and for players new to the series, it's incomprehensible because they barely know who she is. So in that regard, his betrayal could be seen as a left-field decision for him, especially since as someone who has been controlling the Slayer for years, he should know better than anybody how stupid it is to cross him. I guess in that sense it goes back to Hugo Martin's comment where he said that the story of Doom is a long succession of terrible managers. Samuel Hayden and King Novik don't seem that incompetent to me, but the rest of Doom's leadership definitely fits the bill. As for how well the Creed Maker fights, I've already discussed it a little bit, but I was pleasantly surprised at how well he was able to defend himself. While he may have the physique of a background character from Wall-E, he's able to summon some pretty dangerous Maker magic as well as goons at his beck and call. The first phase is practice for the second phase, and ensures that you have a safe space to learn the ropes without getting owned too hard. For instance, he's quicker than you'd expect. The rocket launcher is a horrible choice for this fight, as I discovered early on. Instead, you probably want the chain shot for maximum burst damage. Once phase 1 is over, you get to Leonidas kick him through the window and flat on his tentacled ass, which is where the fight-or-flight instincts really start to kick in for him. He does try bargaining, but once again, he should know that our deontological, demon-hating hero does no deals with evil, no matter their potential practicality. Creed also takes off his clothes because he's a dirty, exhibitionist little slut. People in power are always into weird shit like that, I suppose, even in Urdak. This phase is the first one but on crack, and now you need to be really good at deflecting those parryable halo shots. The sound cues are what will save you there. Pay them heed. Otherwise, it's about good movement and not getting attached to holding any one direction on the left stick for too long. As a brief aside, I do find it interesting that the Slayer generally kills anyone who has ever willingly associated with demons, with the exception of Valen in Doom Eternal. I guess his life is fucking miserable already, and he'd been serving in self-imposed exile for what seems to be millennia, so he got off with a mean mug. Creed is not so lucky and gets a brutal Dreadmace beatdown that feels damn good to watch. That ending cutscene too, with the dragging him back by the tail and all, really characterizes the Slayer perfectly. Awesome moment for the ages, and I appreciated that the gore actually looks serious rather than cartoonish like it often does with the brighter colors. This is no joke, you're really tormenting that fucker. As a last note, his innards look like he's got the infection from Hollow Knight to me. Adios, sucka. Great boss, embodies the Dark Ages combat very well.
Number 3, the Old One. This was a really exciting fight for me, even though it's basically just Cthulhu with face tats. Conceptually, this is one of my favorites from memory. All I hope is that this isn't the Old One, just part of the Witch's Goon Squad or whatever. In all honesty, the Old One is really easy, but Spectacle alone puts it right among the elite. If you haven't seen this channel before, know Alex and I are both suckers for grandiosity. Even though I think Falling for Spectacle has failed us quite a bit in the past, this is still a very mechanically solid boss with a wide moveset and layered attacks. He has a surprisingly deep bag, and he even whipped out a bunch of attacks I'd never seen before while replaying Final Battle. After replaying it, however, I definitely feel like this would have benefited from multiple phases, either a gradual decline in power or an enhanced second phase. Maybe this was purposefully reserved for the true Old One's appearance later on. Who knows? Also, being able to animation cancel is clutch. After a few stagger strikes, the old one will falter for real, putting to end the supposed god of the cosmic realm. It was really cool killing the witch's god before her eyes and then turning to face her like nothing happened. Also, the finisher was phenomenal, but why'd his head peel off like a garden flower? Though maybe he should have taken a page out of Mike Tyson's book, the old one is one of the coolest bosses in the Doom series. I really hope we get some more Atlan bosses soon.
Number 2, Enhanced Azrak. Here we have the hardest fight in the game and the ultimate battle for supremacy in the world of Doom. Azrak, at least in his enhanced form, seems to be the biggest threat we have ever seen the Slayer take on in the series. Doom Eternal had him against some crazy figures in the mythology, but he seemed to not struggle whatsoever. Either he got stronger through the ages, or Azrak is just fucking cracked like that. I'd be curious to hear why he's seemingly stronger than Devoth and the Khan Maker, although for now I'm just choosing to believe that the Wraiths are that powerful. Anyways, the first phase works similarly to the Creed Maker boss, where it's a toned down version of threats to come to get you into the flow of things. Note to the wise, do not bother using the BFC on this guy, just save it for mission 22. I found out the hard way how pointless it is. This is a parry fest on the level of Sekiro with how central it is to victory, and the number one reason that nobody will ever pull off a shieldless run of the game. If you somehow made it here while sucking at parries, good luck dude, you're boned. He is genuinely a difficult boss, and took me over half an hour all said and done to dispatch with. The stun meter animations usually exist to make you feel like a badass, but here Azrak is completely in control and makes you look like a tantruming child. It really establishes just how bad things are that he's managed to ascend to such heights, and it only gets worse once he starts to evolve like Aizen with the Hogyoku. His new form looks worse to me, to be honest, but it's beyond question that it makes him tougher. This phase feels like it's supposed to be the last one if you're going in blind, but it of course is only the beginning. What it really does, design-wise, is teach you a few major strategic details to memorize. For one, you want to destroy his health spikes instantly, both for the armor and the removal of an eventual debilitating threat. I only got to find out what happens if you ignore them once, and it's just a nightmare to deal with, so you do not want that happening at all. Secondly, you learn to pick up on when his combos are done and what the stun animations look like, so you don't make the mistake of trying to nail him with the Dread Mace mid-combo and get your torso bisected in the process. Lastly, you want to stay at least a little distance away from him, or else he'll trap you in a very damaging blood pool that destroys your momentum. He's at least kind enough to start summoning red hooded guys that do nothing but get blown up and give you health and armor. Very considerate of him. Beating this phase brings you to the grand finale, where Azrak makes the grave mistake of killing Surat and learning what happens to people who kill a pet of the Slayer. Be it dragon or hare, you are 100% getting your head torn off of your shoulders for that. This last phase is absolutely methed out as fuck and incredibly fun. Everyone who called this game Parry Slop owes id Software an apology and a shoe shining conducted by Tongue. This is Parry Kino, my friends. Synthetic Man and his cadre of knuckle-dragging genetic unfortunates can't ignore this. Azrak kicked my ass here, but that's how a final battle should feel, and it really does make you start to hate this fucker even more than you thought was possible. By the time I finally managed to punk him out, I was both frothing with rage and cheering like I'd just won the lottery. Finally getting to see him fail to block your punches and swings is nectar for the eyes, and the way they managed to top this fight for me, somehow, is hilarious. I actually preferred the final encounter, where he's weaker, because besides being a cool idea and something rarely seen in a game, it just feels so good to rag on that fucker and get your revenge for the torture he puts you through in this fight. I do still wonder why it is that id Software always mentions boss fights taking so long to program though, usually ranging from 8 months to a year by their measurement, specifically with reference to the Gladiator from Eternal and as a defense for Devoth's middling quality. I know they're a smaller studio and all, but it seems like plenty of other developers have no issue putting loads of boss fights in their games, and I'm unsure why it always caps it at like 3 or 4 big ones per game. This is totally a good faith question, and one I'd love to get an answer on if somebody at id Software or a viewer who knows programming would care to enlighten me. That aside, in case it wasn't clear, Dark Ages' boss roster is miles better than Eternal's and 2016's per my estimate. Pure kick-assery, plain and simple.
Number 1. Azrak and the Witch. Off rip, I gotta praise id for having the courage to take on a gank fight. I feel like gank fights are such hit or misses, even for the likes of From Software who practically make a living off of them. It's not perfect, but Azrak and the Witch is damn fun, and that gank phase is the most difficult individual fight for me, but it gets a lot easier with just Azrak. The gank itself works quite well, and I think the AI toning for both the bubbled enemy and attackable enemy sync perfectly. The bubble feature is a very creative way of making it feel almost like fighting two separate entities, not a duo working under one shared health bar. In general, Phase 1 is thrilling, very claustrophobic, and blends together two distinct enemy types into a polished, combined fight. I love the concept of both using their respective realms' powers to work as one, as well as Azrak's motivation to the Witch.
Avenge your god.
Once the Witch gets sliced open by the shield saw, it's back to just Azrak, and in truth, it's somewhat disappointing to me that he isn't really different at all from his enhanced form in terms of moveset, besides the Fireball Bullet Hell and parryable AoE. He's obviously still very exciting though, and unlike the enhanced fight where I probably carbon polluted hell to even more global warming with near exclusive accelerator use, I also use the rocket launcher here, which probably isn't much better environmentally. I tried the Ravager and Chain Shot, but the Ravager's startup felt a bit too slow and the Chain Shot's fire felt too slow, despite the auto parry upgrade. Once defeated, the game is over, and I will say this was a truly special experience. This was my first Doom game playing on launch, and as a fan of the series now, having beaten every single one barring Doom 3, I loved the Dark Ages and just hope we get more content in the near future. Back to the ending, the Witch's death was great, and the beheaded Azrak shot is one of my favorite moments in this series. Such an on-brand way to finish the game. I cannot wait to see what's next. Maybe the Slayer will be taking on the High Council in the DLC. Azrak and the Witch were a righteous way to end the Dark Ages and cement themselves as one of the best bosses across the history of Doom.
Thanks so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. This marks the end of our content marathon for Doom the Dark Ages, but our work on the Doom series isn't done yet. Stay tuned next week for our video ranking the missions of Doom 2 from worst to best and a Doom 64 ranking down the road. That's all for now, and until next time, deuces.